Dr. Sachs, you've said, quote, we need a massive campaign of awareness, understanding economic justice to say that we need massive increase of development finance. It is urgent. You've also said the words $1 trillion a year. Is this something that the G20 leaders are able to initiate? Who is in a position to provide this kind of investment?
First, let me say, when you're a macroeconomist, $1 trillion is all right, not so much. It's it's a lot of money, but the world output is $100 trillion a year. So I think in units of 1% of world output, and an extra 1% of world output to face up to challenges like ensuring in poor countries that all the kids are in school, or ensuring that everybody has basic health coverage, or ensuring that everybody has access to safe water and sanitation, or to electricity, or to a digital grid. That's not a lot to do. That's not a stretch beyond what we should do. So $1 trillion incremental beyond what we're doing right now each year is a pretty reasonable target for the next few years. Now, in absolute terms, it's a lot of money, and our governments are too many governments not very generous. And the United States, when COVID hit, had several emergency packages for the U.S. that amounted to $6 trillion or $7 trillion if you add up across the three major pieces of legislation. So, yeah, the U.S. managed the $6 or $7 trillion emergency aid, but almost none of it was for anyone outside the United States. It was all for the domestic purposes. So raising an extra trillion for poor countries is not the simplest thing in the world. And I am advocating that it basically should come out of the so-called development finance institutions like the World Bank or the China-created Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank or the Asian Development Bank and other bodies like that. Those institutions currently lend, if you add up all of them together, something around 150 billion a year. But I'm saying it should be around $1 trillion a year. And then the question is, well, how could they do so much more business? And the basic thing that those institutions do is that they're banks. A bank is an intermediary. A bank doesn't create its own money. A bank either borrows money from the capital markets and then lends it, or it borrows it from depositors and then lends it. And so we need these development finance institutions to borrow from the international capital markets and then lend to their members. And then you say, well, what do we need that for? Why don't those countries just borrow on their own? And it's a little bit of financial magic, but these development finance institutions are able to borrow on very good terms, so-called AAA terms. So they get their funds at low interest rates. And because of that, they can lend at low interest rates to their members. And that's the advantage, because if their members, say a poor country, tried to go out to borrow on its own, they would face very high interest rates if they went to the private capital markets. But if they go to the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, they can get the same loan at a low interest rate. And then comes a question, well, how does AIIB, this bank, lend at a low interest rate when the capital markets would demand a high interest rate? And that comes to some financial engineering. But one of the reasons is that the multilateral institutions like that bank have backing of governments. So the governments say, go out and borrow. And if you have a problem, we back you up. And so the governments are at some risk if these development finance institutions do more business. But I think the risk is quite low if, like I keep emphasizing, they're making loans that are for really good purposes, like education, healthcare, clean energy, uh, safe water and sanitation, digital access. I say go for it.